All right, so we've got David Bartholomew, John Fouts, and then we've got Greg Austin and Ruben and myself. And Ben is going to join us, but he said he's going to be a little bit late, so he might jump in there as well. All right, so before we get started with the elm tree, what I wanted to start with today, I just wanted to get a quick sense of, I know we took a break last week. How are you guys feeling with things so far, with the material, the format, question and answer, things like that? How's that going for you?
Sure. Well, Kelly, on my end, it's you know, I read through what Phil had done with questions for this week, and I'm planning on answering those myself. I think I'm learning a great deal from reading what other people have to say, and also, you know, it's always constructive when you get feedback from folks. So a couple of people that are in the training sessions have been good enough to sort of, you know, add on to what I've commented on or given me some feedback. So that's much appreciated.
Good. I'm glad you said that. That the last course that went through, towards the end, people started giving feedback, but the people said they really enjoyed hearing from other people, like it was a discussion and getting comments. So I do encourage you to do that as much as you can, because it's any type of advice you can get, the better.
Sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. There's been a lot of things that I've gotten from the other people's discussion, so that's been really good.
Good. Good. John, are you doing okay with everything?
Yeah, I'd echo the same sentiments. Things are good.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, what I really would like and I told you this last time, I really would like the focus of these Google Hangout conference calls to be idea sharing and presentation skills, because through an online course, it's more difficult to get that going. So with the video capability, it's nice to be able to see people face to face and really talk about how do you present this material to an audience, rather than just memorizing the material and spinning it back out again. So that's where I would like this to go. Today we're going to talk about the Elm Tree of Mastery, and what I want to do is each principle that we go through, I really like you to pull out a need in the audience, because I think that's what captivates the audience the most. There's a reason, and we talked about this sort of last week when we were doing the introduction, but there's a group of people, coaches, sitting in front of you. Half of them probably don't want to be there. The other half are hanging on to every word you're saying, but they all have a common need, and there's a goal for them. So I think establishing that objective of the workshop right up front is sort of what we talked about last week. As you go into each of the principles, there's every trainer, I think, and Ruben, I don't know if you agree with this, but every trainer sort of has one principle that they like to present the most, I think. And different people in your audience are going to connect with different principles better. But I just think right away the Elm Tree of Mastery is one that personally I feel it's the most important, and it was for me the most, it changed the way I coached. And I had been coaching for about 15 years before I ever heard of PCA or heard of the Elm Tree of Mastery. And, you know, I took a lot of things that I was coaching and I said to myself, wow, you're right, I did do that and it worked better. But for me, it was just an amazing principle that changed the way I phrased things, changed the way I set up drills, changed the way I encouraged my players, and I saw results immediately. And that's one of the reasons that I became a trainer, because I thought this is information that I want to share with every coach that's out there, because I just saw such amazing results. And I know some of you had a chance to answer the discussion questions, but have you found yourself using some of the things from the Elm Tree of Mastery just in your past and seen results with it?
I think it ties into the effort piece on this, and where you apply. I like the process part of it. Rather than, I mean, I said in a previous post that we redefine winning. One of the things that we wind up doing, and we'll wind up doing this with our group in another 2 weeks, is that we come together after we've kind of gotten to know each other, and we come together and create a full value contract or a shared values contract of where we come from, and with that we talk about what our goals are for the upcoming year and for the 4 years that they're with us. And what's nice about that is we're able to separate them out into the process goals as opposed to the outcome goals, and to show that literally if we do these things, the rest will take care of itself. And it's pretty self-evident when you've got them up on a board that if we work hard, if we show up every day, if we bring a good attitude, if we're men of character, if we talk about those items, that how they can maximize our opportunities to achieve the outcome goals. And I think seeing it in a contract form where everybody's signing off on it has helped us to achieve what we've achieved over the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I'm asking too is I think, you know, as I said before, anytime you can connect a personal story to any of these principles, it's helpful. The audience will walk out and say, wow, you know, that makes sense to me. So I guess my question more is, what is the objective of presenting this principle of the ELM Tree of Mastery? What do you want your audience to get from the ELM Tree of Mastery principle? Can anybody think of just one quick, what's your objective in presenting this to them?
Kelly, my objective when I would be presenting this would be trying to provide the group with sort of my first experience when I was reading it, and that would be that failure is okay, mistakes are expected, but how players internalize and sort of organize in their own minds, you know, how they move past that. For example, stretch goals. Stretch goals was not something that was in my lexicon of you know, words for players, and so, you know, I would talk about effort, but I really didn't give them a path. You know, players that I coached, I really didn't give them a path towards achieving greater effort, because it was always outcome based. And so, you know, this is a little longer than but I would really want to pass that along, the learning and understanding that I kind of developed when I was reading through it.
Okay. Great. Anybody else?
Well, yeah, because you hate to talk too much about yourself, but you know, I'm a firm believer in, obviously, PCA and especially the ELM Tree. And from my past experiences with coaching high school girls, it's been phenomenal. I mean, for the past 2 years, I've taken a mediocre team and finished very well by the end of the season. And we don't focus on winning. Obviously, if we look at the number of wins and losses we have, especially when you're ahead of a weak team, it was disproportionate. But we worked on the other things, on, you know, effort, learning, mistakes, and by the end of the year, we were beating teams that we lost handily at the beginning. So the growth is just phenomenal when using the ELM Tree of Mastery.
Good. And I have a lot of coaches come up to me. I obviously, it's sort of a kind of a male-dominated audience most of the time when I'm doing this, and I've had a lot of coaches come up to me as a female coach, and they say, well, I'm a guy and I'm coaching girls now, and, you know, what would you suggest? Which principle or what should I work on the most? And I always say right off the bat, the ELM Tree of Mastery, because, you know, there's a difference in coaching males and females. And I grew up with brothers, so I'm used to their mentality, and I just think the ELM Tree of Mastery is something, especially for female sports. You know, girls internalize a lot more, I think, and they hold on to their mistakes a little bit longer than boys do when you're coaching. So I agree with you, David. I think that is extremely, extremely effective. Ben, can you hear us?
I'm good. I'm all set up. It took me a little while,
all right,
but
well,
I'm
welcome.
here. Thank you.
I'm glad. This is Ben, everybody. Ben, you just want to say hi, because I don't think everybody's met you yet.
Hi, nice to meet everybody. I see Ruben. I've met him before. Glad to be on the call finally.
All right, Ben, why don't you tell them just real quick where you're from and what's your coaching? What's your sports background?
I'm from New York. I actually live in Staten Island. And for the past 5 years, I've been coaching youth basketball. And I come from a sports background in terms of worked professionally with the Miami Heat, and then spent a number of years as an athletic administrator in college athletics. So I have and I play college basketball as well.
All right, thanks. Okay, so I don't want to cut anyone off. Does anyone else want to share? You know, what do you think is the main objective of this principle, this ELM Tree principle?
I'll in a short blurb, I'd say that you get much more out of it when you teach from an ELM perspective. You're going to wind up, you know, almost optimizing your opportunities more than the coaches who coach with outcome goals or to win at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's getting the audience to understand that, you know, with the attitude that we want to win, but if you want a better opportunity to win, teach mastery as opposed to something that's temporary as far as a short-term win at all cost goal or the scoreboard.
Okay, great. Well, let's jump right in. What I'm going to do
Kelly,
with these calls.
Kelly,
Yeah.
can I?
Yeah.
You know, I can't help but think how I would answer your questions.
Go ahead, jump in.
And you know, I like everything that was shared here. The way John articulated it is probably the closest to how I would have answered your question, in that what do I want people to leave with after, you know, we've explored ELM together? I want them to understand why over 25 years of research in lots of fields, especially sports psychology, tells us over and over that a mastery approach produces better results than a scoreboard-oriented approach, and that so that's it. And if I were to expand a little, if I were to add a few more words, it would be that there are some things in sports psychology that are controversial, and that one sports psychology leans this way, one leans the other way. This is one that is non-controversial. There is unanimous agreement in the field of sports psychology that a mastery approach produces better results.
Hey, Ruben, is there
And that's exactly.
is there an opportunity for you guys to forward? I mean, I'm an academic guy as well, so is there a way that you guys could forward some of those studies or you know, get us a list of those so we could see them?
What I'm going to do is one of our former colleagues, her name is Tanya Booker. Tanya Booker was an assistant basketball coach to Tara Vanderveer back in the days when PCA was getting founded. She's now, and she was a wonderful trainer, and she now lives in Portland. She wrote a paper that kind of summarized the original body of research that the double goal coach model is based on, and the three principles. And so what I will do, Kelly, I'll send that to you.
Okay.
And so that you can forward it to everybody.
Okay. That's great. And I'm glad you added that in, Ruben, because what you said is basically that's my objective. When I start with the ELM tree of mastery, remember it's after the point in the slide presentation where we've showed them the double goal coach model, the Venn diagram that and I can actually pull that up with screen share. But do all of you have the PowerPoint visible right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
So we've already done the introduction. We've already explained the double goal coach model, which is the win at all cost versus the scoreboard cost. Let me see if I can get a screen share up so I can show you what I'm talking about here. Hold on one sec.
Kelly, while you're doing that, I'm going to add to John. John, so I talked about, you know, the original paper summarizing the research. Typically, if we're going to point to one example, and the PowerPoint helps lead us to this, it's that Joan Duda study done on Olympic athletes. Now, I think when you talk about that study, you have to be careful that you don't imply that this whole principle is based on one study on Olympic athletes. This is just an example of the research that points to mastery as the way to go. It's a good example because it's sports and it's competition at the highest level, but it is only an example of the research.
Exactly. So thanks, Ruben. I know you can't see me now. You can see my screen, though.
Yeah.
So we've already gone through, this is the model of double goal coaching, and then we've already talked about the systems approach, which we talked about last week. And then here's the principles. And I always start by saying these are the principles that run through every workshop that we do. These are the principles that the whole PCA movement is founded upon. And the great thing about this is they're consistent messages that we send to the coaches, the athletes, and the parents. So any of these terms that you'll hear me say, you're going to hear them repeated. And that's one of the greatest things about PCA is that you can use these phrases you might not have heard before throughout, you know, all different areas of all different audiences you're talking to. So one of the things, before I start, this is the next one that comes up. This is the Marshall video. And I say similar to what Ruben said. And I asked the coaches, how many of you would like to dramatically and rapidly improve the performance of your athletes? That's the very first question I say. And of course they raise their hand. All of them say yeah. And I say, you know, I have something here that is an amazing principle based on research, and again, that is non-controversial. Not many principles are not much research is non-controversial. This is something that many researchers from all different areas have said. There's a certain way you're coaching that can get maximum results from your athletes, which will then, in turn, give you better results on the scoreboard. So anybody interested? And, you know, everyone's like, well, okay. And I see the audience perk up right then and there. And they think, oh, my gosh, I've got some magic pill that I'm going to give to all the athletes that's going to make this happen. So then I break it down and say, okay, let's look at this first. Let's get some terminology out of the way. I'm going to show you the first video, which is the We Are Marshall clip right here. And I asked the audience, how many people have seen We Are Marshall? Okay, I'm going to show you a clip from the beginning of this movie. And I want you to really pay attention to what the coach is, what the words he's using with his athletes, and see if you can pick up some positive things he's doing as a coach and some negative things he's doing as a coach. Okay, so then I play. Has anyone not seen that video? Can everybody hear me?
Not the specific one.
Okay, I can't see you, so all right. Well, if you've seen that, I don't know if I can play it right here for you right now. I don't know if I can. I can't play it, I don't think, on screen share. Oh, there it is.
We hear it.
Good effort out there today. Let me be clear about this. A good effort is not enough. I'm proud of it. But I will not accept losing with you. Because there's only one thing they judge us on. There's only one thing people remember. And it ain't how we play the game. Winning is everything.
Okay, so my first question for the audience is, what are some things as a coach he did well? Did anybody notice some things that he said to his group? This is the halftime speech. What did he say that was a good thing?
I'm proud of you.
Right. I'm proud of you. You gave a good effort out there, okay? But then, what did he do next to motivate his players?
Effort's not good enough.
Okay, told them effort wasn't good enough. What else?
You referred to the scoreboard.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, winning was everything.
Right. So, what was his #1 motivator right now that he's using as a tactic to get his players to come out in the second half and play harder?
Scoreboard.
Scoreboard, or what else? What would you say?
Results.
What did you say?
Results.
Results. Yep.
I think
What
it's
did the
appealing
players-
to their pride.
Yeah. What did the players' faces look like?
Not good.
Not good. They were scared. So he used fear as a tactic. And I asked the audience, how many of you have ever seen a coach use fear as a tactic? Yelling, screaming, intimidation. We call that the win-at-all-costs coach. So that's just, I just get that term right out there, right off the bat.
Well, and I think when he starts off the way he did, he uses the word but, which verbally erases everything he just said, and he solely focuses and leaves his players with the fact that their word comes from what comes about from that scoreboard that day.
Exactly. Exactly. And then what I always do next is I say, okay, there is one thing that can inhibit a player's peak performance more than anything else. Research has shown there is one thing. What do you think would stop a player from giving peak performance? What's the roadblock to peak performance for most athletes?
Fear of making a mistake. Yeah.
Fear of making a mistake. Again, a non-controversial topic. Fear of making a mistake is the #1 thing that stops a player from peak performance. Yet, so many coaches use fear as their #1 motivator, and also show that it's not okay to make a mistake. So let's just think about that. Now let's go to the next, and then the next slide is this one. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay, the next slide that pops up, and again, this is again based on the research study. So let me ask you a question. This was a study done in 2000 by Joan Duda, University of Birmingham in England, and she actually researched and studied teams and their different coaching philosophies and styles. She put them into two categories. Some are scoreboard focused, like the coach we just saw. Others are task focused, focusing on the skills and mastering their sport. So at the end of the Olympics, when she did a medal count, which ones do you think won the most medals? And you would say, of course.
Yeah.
Number 2.
Right, number 2, right. Then you click the button and the next one pops up and it says, well, why? Because everybody always says, oh, yeah, I know the answer. Why do you think that is? So let me ask you, why do you think, why do people that focus on mastering the sport get better? Now, you guys know because you read the book, but.
I think it's because those things are under their control.
Yeah.
Okay. Good answer. Exactly. So I've had answers everything from because they're focusing on what they're doing, they're not worried about everyone else, and usually somebody does bring up, they're focusing on what they can control. And that's where I just do a real quick, all right, let's think about this word control for a second. We're going to talk about this a little bit later. What are some things in any given sporting event that the athletes and the coaches have absolutely no control over? Okay, let's
The referees.
5 things. Okay, referees. What else? No control.
Competition.
Competition. What else?
Weather.
Weather.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, in a sport
Quality
like
of the team you're playing.
I'm sorry, I
Is
didn't
it
hear
things
that.
that we don't control or that we
Things
do
that you
control?
cannot control in a sporting event.
The quality of the team you're playing.
Exactly.
Who's
And
going
you-
to show up?
in
Who's
some
going to show up?
sports-
Who's going to be there?
Yep. Who's going to be
Star
there?
player
Who's
could
going
be
to show
sick.
up? And
in
then
some
the-
sports, the bounces, like in baseball, there's such thing as bad hops, or in golf. When I play golf, my ball always bounces the wrong way in a very unlucky way.
Yeah, field conditions, things like that. So I list all these things that we can't control, and I say ultimately the one thing that we actually can't control as athletes and coaches is the scoreboard. Because we don't have control over what the final score is going to be. Yet some of these coaches, that's 100% of their focus, and that is that's the one thing that they are probably least in control of, is the scoreboard. But that's what we focus on. So let's look at a different coach. Let's look at the coach that actually ended up taking over for Marshall. And the people that haven't seen the movie We Are Marshall, I usually ask, and I'll fill in, tragically, the Marshall University football team was killed in a plane crash, and this new coach, Jack Lengyel, had to take over, didn't have a lot of the skill and the talent that the original coach had, so he had to use a different tactic to get motivation out of his players. And then I say, okay, let's watch what he did. Now, I don't know if I want to take the time right now to go through. This is a little bit longer clip. But you know what? I may do it because I can do it. So let me show you, for those of you that haven't seen it.
Talk about our opponent this afternoon. They're bigger, faster, stronger, more experienced, and on paper, they're just better. And they know it, too. But I want to tell you something that they don't know. They don't know your heart. I do. I've seen it. You have shown it to me. You have shown this coaching staff, your teammates. You have shown yourselves just exactly who you are in here. When you take that field today, you've got to lay that heart on the line, man. From the soles of your feet, with every ounce of blood you've got in your body, lay it on the line until the final whistle blows. And if you do that, we cannot lose. We may be behind on the scoreboard at the end of the game, but if you play like that, we cannot be defeated.
All right, what's the difference in what he did?
The place of pure love.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I had Alan Strachan as one of our trainers up in New York, and he brought up a point when I was watching him do a workshop a few months ago, and he said, how did Jack Lengyel address those players? What did he call them?
Men.
Men. He called them men. So was he caring about how they were performing, or was he caring about who they were as a person?
Who they were as a
And
person.
I never picked that up before. I thought that was a neat thing to bring out. He called them men. Now look at the players' faces. What did their faces look like? Even though on the scoreboard they were getting crushed left and right every time they played, what did their faces look like?
Inspired.
Yeah. They were inspired. They were excited. So he's taking the skills. He says, you know, we may be behind on the scoreboard, but if you play with your heart, if you give 100% effort, we cannot be defeated. Those players are inspired to play well. That's the type of coaching we're talking about, focusing on what you can control, focusing on your own effort, and mastering the skills. And that's how you're going to get the most out of your players. So the next slide is, okay, this basically breaks it down. Again, what are the two types of coaches? We've got the scoreboard definition, we've got the mastery definition. Scoreboard definition coaches are focusing on, and you know, as you click, these are showing all right now, but as you click, they come up one at a time. Scoreboard definition are focusing on the results of the game. That's it, bottom line. Mastery definition is focusing on the effort. What are the players doing to show that they're trying their hardest? And can that be measured? Is that something you can measure? How can you measure, and let me ask you coaches, I'm going to give you a second. I want you to turn to the person next to you, and I want you to talk about how do you measure an athlete's effort? You can measure how many times they get the goal in the cage, or how many shots they make, or how many blocks they have. But how could you as a coach measure their effort? Okay, so I tell them, take a minute, turn to the person next to you and explain to them as a coach, how would you measure effort? Does anybody have any ideas?
I look for the height differential in helmets as they're traveling across the field to make a defensive play. If I see a helmet all of a sudden lower, that tells me they're shifting gears to get someplace as opposed to automatically trying to get there. We define that as a low.
Okay.
I would say, Kelly, like if I had to use ice hockey as an example, you know, I always measure effort by my players. What are they doing away from say the outcome base of the game? So what are they doing if it isn't scoring a goal? What types of things are they doing? That in the chapter it talks about, and I can't exactly remember who it was, but talks about a field hockey player staying wide. And because they stay wide, that allows the striker to be opened. And I think that's one of the things that I took away from it is to try and adjust my thinking to not so much focus on the outcome myself as a coach, but what are everybody, how are they all working together, and are they doing the smaller components that make such a big difference to the game?
Right. Exactly.
And for our team in basketball, it's the loose balls, looking at which team is getting to those balls that are just out there, the 50-50 balls, and who's getting to them first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I encourage coaches to do is keep track of that. Make it accountable. Make the people accountable for effort. As a coach, I didn't keep track of the effort. I would use it as little statements to say at halftime or in between quarters, but I would never think about actually writing down how many times did my player run as fast as she could to get to that loose ball first, or how many times on defense were they in position to box out? Even if they didn't get the rebound, were they in the right position? So really focusing on the effort and making accountability to the athletes for their effort is the first step in the Elm Tree of Mastery. Second one, and I don't know if you guys need me to go back and forth, but the second one is the L, the learning that's taking place. And I have a question for you all. How many of you have ever gone into a competition and thought to yourself, okay, we are going to crush this team. We are so much better than they are. We have beat them 4 times already. And you go in there and you go into that competition, and all of a sudden it's like your team's never played before and the skill level drops down. Has anybody ever noticed that happening?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Conversely, how many of you have ever gone into a competition against a more skilled team than yours, knowing that well ahead of time, and your players step up to the competition, and all of a sudden the game is like neck and neck the whole time on a game you thought you were going to get crushed? Anybody ever have that happen?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so how cool is that you have an opportunity, no matter who you're playing, that your players can actually learn from the players they're up against. They can learn good things. They can learn what not to do. They can learn some good moves they didn't have before. You can point out what they can learn. So all of these little mistakes that used to be considered quote-unquote failures are now opportunities to learn from the better skilled player. So instead of the smaller kid that's man-to-man against a 6'5" guy being defeated and dejected, he can now look at it and go, wow, you know what? I saw that move he did. He did that fake to the left and pass to the right, and that was amazing. He just learned from that. So you know, as a coach, if you know he's going to get crushed again next time he goes out there, ask him what he's learning for the player he's marking. So quick example of that. That's just a little quick one I use for the L. And then the last one, mistakes are okay. Okay, everybody, stand up. You don't have to stand up where you are, but I have everybody stand up. And I say, okay, I just messed up. I'm a player on your team, and I just made the biggest mistake of the game. As a coach, I want you non-verbally to show me right now that the mistake I just made was not okay. Show me what your face would look like or what your body language would be doing. Show me real quick that that mistake was not okay that I just did. Come on, we're on video. You guys can show me. What would it look like? Right, exactly. Like, what's going on? All right. Without even saying a word, coaches can convey very quickly that it's not okay that that player just made a mistake. On the other hand, if I just made a big mistake in a game, who's beating themselves up the most right now?
The player.
The player that did.
Right. I'm already being really hard on myself. I look over at my coach, and my coach is doing this. Okay, so there my coach is on me too. Next time I go out to do a play, how am I going to be feeling?
Fearful.
Don't want to do it again.
Terrible.
Not great. John Wooden is one of the greatest basketball coaches ever. I love his quotes, but one of his great quotes is, "The team that makes the most mistakes wins." Why is that?
They show the most effort.
Mm-hmm. What
They're
else?
You learn
stretching
what
themselves.
to do.
Yep.
You learn what
And
to
they're
do
not
better.
afraid to do what?
Make them.
They're not afraid to take risks.
Yes.
And I don't know about you, but I would love to have a team of kids that are not afraid to go out and take risks. So that's real quick. That's how I just go through ELM Tree of Mastery, ELM. I just use a really quick example for each one to show them what these ELM actually look like. And then you can move on. Any questions on that? Or Ruben, did you have anything to add?
Are you asking them questions, though, like you did with us each time regarding what does that look like, or tell me about an experience? Are you asking for that as you go through this, giving an example, then asking what does it look like when this happens, and then giving an example?
I usually do. In my workshop, I spend more time on the Elm Tree of Mastery than I do on the other two principles. And Ruben, I don't know if you agree with this as well. I just do, because I think it's a very, very important principle that kind of encompasses a lot of the other ones too. But I do. I have a lot of back and forth dialogue and talking going on, and I'm moving around the room and I'm asking people to share with a partner, anything I can do to get interaction happening. But it is also a time sucker, so you have to be really careful of your pace. Sometimes you get someone in the audience that wants to tell you a 10-minute story about they want to, kind of toot their own horn a little bit and tell you a 10-minute story about a time when they showed a player that it was okay to make a mistake. So you have to sort of be aware of what's going on, and sometimes you have to cut people off without being rude, which is a hard thing to do too. But
yeah, Kelly.
go ahead.
Kelly, I think it's natural to take more time on ELM than the other two principles because with the current PowerPoint, there's actually more there. We've got the 2 video clips. We've got the which Olympic athletes earned the most medals. There's kind of a prelude before you even talk about the principle. So I think that's natural that you would take more time on that one than the other two. John, your question, are you asking? I hope that every trainer's answer would be like Kelly's. Yes, I ask them questions. We make it a conversation. Anytime you go 90 to 120 seconds where it's just you talking, teaching, preaching, even telling a story, I think it needs to be broken up with something else. Like, how many of you have experienced this? Even if they don't talk, even if they just nod their heads or raise their hand, it keeps it a two-way deal, or it keeps it from being one way. So I would encourage you, John, to think about it that way. Every couple minutes, if I've been talking, I break it up somehow.
Because we want this, as we said in the beginning, this is a workshop. These coaches are coming in expecting a 90-minute lecture. That's what they have in their head already, and we want it to be different than that. We want to engage the audience, get them to make it real. That's why I do a lot of questions like, what do the players look like? Or what do you look like as a coach? And as Ruben said, even just when I get them out of their seat, that takes all of about 10 seconds. Stand up in your seat, show me what it would be like, a coach that just told me it's not okay that I made a mistake. Okay,
Yep.
that's that. I call those little energy boosters. They're just real quick. Get them up out of their seat doing it. They're kind of laughing and giggling. And then when they sit back down again, you've got their undivided attention for at least the next 3 minutes to go on to the next one. So, especially because these workshops are usually at night, in the evenings after a long day, anything you can do to energize, give those quick energy boosters to the audience, the better. Everybody good with that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So then the next slide goes into the research again. And we always say, I should say that, the research should support the principles, but the research shouldn't drive the principles. So, basically these principles are common sense. You're not teaching people things they've never heard before, but the cool thing is that it's backed up by research. So we don't want to push the research too much, like, oh, well, research says this, so now you have to believe it. It's more like, here's a great principle, here's what the result is going to be, and we've got research to back it up. So the next slide shows, this is research from Robert Rossler from Stanford University, showing that when you coach in this mastery environment, what is going to happen to, anxiety is going to go where? Thumbs up or thumbs down, everyone? Where's anxiety going to go?
Down.
Down. And then conversely, they all say, kind of a rhetorical question, where is self-confidence going to go? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Kelly, can I just jump in? So,
yeah.
Kelly just gave us a simple example of how not to deliver talk, right? By saying, okay, show me with either a thumbs up or thumbs down. In a mastery climate, anxiety goes, and she gets us all to participate. We're all engaged. We don't have to say anything, but we're responding to her, and she's keeping it two-way with just the thumbs up, thumbs down.
And I also want to point out real quick, too, I'm sharing with you what I do. I present, and if those of you that got to see Ruben do his presentation, the YouTube video that I showed you, he has a completely different style than I do. Eric Eisendrath has a completely different style. Al Strachan has a different style. We all have a different style to do this. So like the thumbs up, thumbs down, if that works for you, do it. If you have a more clever, interesting way to get the audience engaged, do it. The greatest thing about this is this workshop, the principles are there, the structure is there, the research is there, but we want you as a trainer to come up with some really creative ways to get the audience engaged based on what you like to do. So don't feel like this is like a verbatim script of what you need to do. I'm just sharing some things that I do.
And Kelly, we were talking about research that's non-controversial. I'm going to share with you some other research that's non-controversial. The worst way to try to teach something is to lecture to people about it. Okay? In education, I know that happens, but the experts in learning say that is the least effective way to teach. And the more people are doing, saying, conversing, processing, interacting, learning curves go up. True learning, meaningful learning goes way up. So Kelly, the reason I said that is, yes, we have different styles and personalities and different experience. The example you give might be different than the example I give, but where are we similar? The content is the basic content is similar, the basic structure is similar, and none of us deliver lectures.
Mm-hmm.
Those are how we're similar.
Yep, exactly. Okay, I was trying to get the screen back up, but it doesn't seem to be coming back up right now. Okay. Thanks, Ruben, for bringing that up. Yeah, as I said, I'm a teacher by trade, so I know those statistics were taught to us in college all over the place. People remember 10% of what they're told in a lecture. They remember 40% of what they respond to in a lecture, and they remember 70% of what they're actively engaged in. So when you're doing an hour-and-a-half lecture, they're going to get 10% out of it. It might be your name and probably where you went to college and maybe one story you told them. But if they can be actively involved and making it real to them, making them process it in their brain according to what they're doing, it works much better. So then the next slide is I think the next slide is one of the most important, and it's one that the one that says, and as I said, I don't know why I can't pull it up right now. I was trying to pull it up to show you, but it's the one that says coaching in a mastery focus gives players a feeling of, and there's a letter C and then a blank line. So this one always cracks me up, this slide, because I always say, what does that give you a feeling of? Open that up to the audience. You will be so surprised how many words begin with a C that are not the word you're looking for. I just did this last week at a workshop with kids, and I said, well, what does this give you coaching with a mastery focus or playing with a mastery focus gives you a feeling of, and they said, what do you think they said? What are some other C words that come up?
Competition.
Confidence, competition, courage. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's really funny. When they get to that, when they finally do get to that word control, that is the key. And this is where I say, okay, everyone just stop for a minute. This is groundbreaking, because the idea that, and this again, and I show them in the book, page 16 in the book. Okay, this is what changed Jim Thompson, the founder of PCA. This is what changed this principle for him. What is all this research saying? What does it actually mean? Let's boil it down to the nuts and bolts. And the nuts and bolts, and I show them on page 16, halfway down the page, there's a secret to sports psychology. Here's the secret. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth paragraph down. The secret of sports psychology is, who can find it for me? And I have everybody pull out their books, and they're all trying to find, there's a secret on page 16. Look for it. Look for it. That's the way I get their heads in the book, too. And I say, who can find it? And every coach in the room is probably more competitive than half the kids. And I actually have people like racing through the book, like, oh, I got it, I found it. When you find it, stand up. Who can tell me the secret? And somebody stands up and says, focus on what you can control and block out the rest. And that's it. And you know, it's kind of a dramatic moment, because I'm trying to figure out why you can't see me now. There you go. You know, everybody goes, wow, and that's it, the secret. Focus on what you can control and block out the rest. And again, think about that as a kid, as a person, and as an adult. We talked about what you can't control. The ELM tree of mastery are all in their control. So then we move on to the next slide, which talks about, okay, let's put this into reality now. Okay, how can we use this as coaches? So let's talk about this scenario. Now, scenarios are an excellent opportunity. This is the first one that comes up. At the end of the workshop, there's a whole scenario menu. We like to throw this one in there because this is where it gets real for them. So the next scenario says, Jesse hangs his head every time he misses a shot, and as a result doesn't get back on defense. What can you do? So what I do is I have, now this is, again, it depends on the workshop, but if you're doing a youth workshop and you have multiple sports in the room, let's say you have, 30 or 40 coaches and they all are coaching different sports, I would say, okay, get with 3 other people, so there's at least 4 or 5 in a group that are all coaching the same sport that you coach. If it's, high school or something like that, I'll group them according to coaching. If it's an entire soccer association or little league or basketball, I will have them match up with people in their own age group. So I'll say, if you're coaching U8, get with 3 people that coach U8, U12, U15, whatever it is. Because I think this one specifically, if you have a coach of a U8 team who's talking about how they would treat this kid, Jesse, and you have a coach that's coaching high school level or U15, and they're both trying to talk about how they would handle it, it's totally different sports psychology. So that's just something I do. But I would say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes to get with your group, and I would like you to quick introduce yourself so you know each other. Talk about, I want each person to get a chance to share how you would handle this athlete, Jesse, if he was on your team. And then find out the person whose birthday is closest to today, that's going to be the spokesperson for the group. So you all have to come up with a conclusion as a group as the best answer to share. Go. And they've got 2 minutes. And what I do too, and I have my laptop is set up that I have a stopwatch app. So I actually pull up the stopwatch app so they can actually see the 2 minutes counting down. That way, when the 2 minutes is up, I don't have to say, okay, everybody, quiet down, I'm ready to start. For some reason, magically, when people see a stopwatch, I think we're all coaches. We're used to timing things. When you see a stopwatch count down to 0, the whole room gets quiet. It's miraculous. So,
Kelly, I've seen you use that. Kelly, I've seen you use that stopwatch. And refresh my memory. When you show when you project the stopwatch and the countdown, do you actually have to close out of your workshop PowerPoint, or are you able to
I just minimize it. I actually
minimize it.
Yeah, I have a hyperlink in my PowerPoint that just goes right to the website. I guess it's a website. Yeah. the online stopwatch, and then
Uh-huh.
I can just do it, and then when the stopwatch counts down, I just maximize it again,
Got it.
and the PowerPoint's right back up.
Yep.
So it's something, you know, I didn't share it in the workshop because you have to kind of know how to use it, and if everybody sees a stopwatch,
Yep.
they're going to click on it, and if they don't have the hyperlink set up, it's going to bring them to, you know, craziness. But I find it really works out well. So the group shares. They have 2 minutes. At the end of the 2 minutes, I say, okay, group number 1 over here, you share with me your answer. So this is where, okay, let me just say, if you guys were a group together, how would you handle a student like Jesse, or a player like Jesse on your team? What's one of the answers you guys would give if you were in a group?
Kelly,
Whose
what
birthday's
I would
close
say,
today?
so, Kelly, I would say I would, you know, to handle the situation, I would likely, you know, watch my verbal cues and my, you know, and the kind of body language that I'm giving off.
Okay. So as a coach, you're going to watch how you're handling. So you think one of the reasons he's not getting back on defense is because he's seeing your disapproval?
Well, I unfortunately, I think I'd answer it differently if I hadn't, you know, read through some of this stuff, right? And so now I'm kind of at a loss as to how I might have done it. I now would probably say that I certainly wouldn't hold my head in my hands and you know, expect good results from that, but I probably would have a month ago.
Okay, so what would you do going forward then? Because the question says, what would you do?
Okay. So what I would likely do is I would likely give immediate feedback at that time. That's what I probably would do to try and you know, get him to get on defense again. That's probably what I would do. However, if I was teaching it from a standpoint of the ELM tree, you know, I would write it down for future reference back to them.
Okay, that's a great point. We call that parking it in PCA. Yeah. That's a great way to do it. Park the bus, put the comment on a clipboard, and get back to it later because it might not be the ideal time to bring up a critique. Thank you, Greg, for sharing.
Kelly, I'm gonna jump in on that. You know, you could park this. You could park this and come back to it later. But we're talking about a lack of effort here. Mm-hmm. And as a mastery-oriented coach, you're gonna hold you mentioned this yourself, Kelly. You're gonna hold your players accountable for their effort. So this is one that I personally would not park. I would look for the first opportunity to address it. And in some sports, it might mean a brief substitution. But you know, because the thing is, if we tell coaches that, you know, we're not going to respond, or, you know, it's okay or whatever, coaches are going to go, BS. That's not okay. You know, it's not okay not to play defense. You know, and maybe if the child is 5 or 6 or 7, you know, there's some slack. But teaching age-appropriate effort is part of being a mastery coach. So I would encourage this one. And Greg, I understand what you were doing. You're processing and trying to apply the principle and figure out what would be, you know, PCA approach to this. In my opinion, and I know Jim's opinion, this is not something that we would park in most cases.
I agree. We, you know, I would tell coaches that it's like, and we set the table with just a simple question that we ask on a regular basis, which is, what's the most important play? The next one. Don't compound the mistake. Shake it off. But don't compound the mistake by bringing it into the next play. So then you're focusing it at leaving that behind, getting on and moving forward. Mm-hmm. But and to me, it's the same thing. If we can't get them to be able to shake off the mistake, because I see a secondary issue of, yes, it's the effort, but how are you shaking that mistake off? How are you abandoning or, you know, getting rid of that so that you can go on doing what needs to be done? And if not, that's, I think, one of the taking it into that. How do we bounce back from mistakes? If that's a ritual that's got to be taught so they can move on to that next important play.
And John, I am so glad you brought that up, because how do you get players to shake off that mistake? How do you get them to find a way to take that mistake, to get rid of it, and to move on to the next play? That's a really tough thing to do. So just what I try to do when I'm answering these questions is just that. It's you have to get the group, any answer you get, because you might get some crazy answers from this group. You've got to get that group, whatever answer they give you, tie it to the principles, tie it to a tool, tie it to something that we're using. And you can sometimes you have to really listen for it, and sometimes people give. I've had so many coaches, just to be funny, say, well, Jesse was on my team, I'd yank him. I'd put his butt on the bench, and he's not playing anymore. So you as facilitators of a workshop, again, just be aware that you've got to validate what the audience is saying, but you also have to tie it to the principles we're talking about. So I would say something like, John, I love the way that you brought that up. Let's talk about how we would get that mistake to be forgotten and move on. So then we go to the next slide, which is the mistake ritual. Let me show you one of the great things that we do in PCA is we teach you some research behind these principles, and then we're going to give you a toolkit. One of the most wonderful things about this is you're going to leave this workshop with a toolkit that you can bring out to your practice tomorrow. And you can start using these tools, and they're physical examples. They're great, clear ways you can get the most out of your kids. So, John, I'm glad you brought that up. The next thing what we're going to talk about is on page 23 in your book, if you want to turn to it real quick. And we call it, this is a recovery ritual. We call it the mistake ritual. And a mistake ritual is just that, what John said. It's a physical sign. Again, research has shown that kids or adults or anybody using some type of a ritual to get people to know very quickly across a field or across a pool, I recognized your mistake, I saw that you did it, but we're going to move on to the next play, is extremely effective. So one of the things that we share with you is called the flesh. And we borrowed that from Mike Lagarza in Redwood, California, and he's coaching college basketball. This works extremely well with little youth kids. They love it. Anything having to do with a toilet or poop, they will listen to you. So what I do, I would like you all right now to put your 2 fingers, put them up in the air. Everybody, right now, put your arms up. All right, on 3, I'm going to have you flush the toilet, and I want you to make the loudest flushing sound you could possibly make. 1, 2, 3. All right. So the whole room of 60 adults is now making flushing sounds, and they're all laughing. And I think, okay, you guys had fun with that? Imagine a bunch of 7-year-old boys. Okay, they love it. So we call that the flush. And it's a term, it's quick, it's used. Other teams have used brush it off or shake it off. Julie Foudy, one of our National Advisory Board members, again, if you're coaching girls, they always have a ponytail wrapped around their wrist, usually, 90% of the time. She put a ponytail on her wrist, and she would snap out of it. That's something they use. I just recently learned another one from a coach who coaches at a deaf school. And he said when you put your 2 fingers together like this and you go like that, it means let it go. And that's the mistake ritual they use. Let it go. Now, I have a 6-year-old that's been singing that Disney song from Frozen for the last 8 months. So as soon as I taught her that, she's now going around the house going, let it go, from Frozen. But again, it's a visual, no sweat, brush it off. Do any of you have a mistake ritual that you use with your team that's very effective?
Yeah, but it's not imaginative. It's not imaginative. Our guys will just shake their hands, shaking it off. But
yep. Good. So that's where I get the audience, and a lot of them will have something, and they'll share, and they'll say, oh, I heard this from one person, or I heard this from another person. But again, it's powerful. The mistake ritual, it's powerful, it's proven, and it works. And when you don't have, like Greg said, I think we need, or Ruben said, you have to address this right away. Sometimes in the course of a game, you can't stop the game, bring the player over, address the mistake, and then send them back out there. Sometimes it's just a matter of saying, all right, buddy, I saw it, flush it, let it go, wipe it off, whatever it is, and move on. And that seems to work. So it is 1 o'clock. That's basically the end of the slides. What I'd like you to do is, and I wanted to, it's on, we're not going to do it right now, but if you scroll down to slide number 32, that's the scenario menu. I want you to have a chance this week to play around with that, because the scenario menu gives, I think, 9 different scenarios for each principle. So the Jesse scenario that we just shared, that's one example of a scenario. Each of those scenarios is tied to a tool that's in your book. So that's where I said in the questions this week, you should be very, very familiar with all of these tools, because at the end of the workshop, when we go through the scenarios, you're going to need to know these tools, and you're going to want to have sport-specific examples to give to the group. It's always good to say, oh yeah, mistake ritual, effort goals, whatever, but you need to be able to make it real for them. So effort goals is always one that I always bring up. I think effort goals is a great tool for me personally. I use it a lot with my players. So that's one. I always make sure I use that scenario that brings up the effort goals. So over the course of the week, guys, slide 32, just play around with that. Just focus on the Elm Tree of Mastery section right now. Go through some of those scenarios and think about how is that one of the most engaging things for the audience? How can you get the audience to really dig into these scenarios? Think about it, mix around, get to know each other, really toss some ideas around, because that's what makes these workshops so impactful. All right, I'm not going to hold you past your time. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
Hey, can I share something with the group real quick?
Sure, go ahead. If anybody has to go, it's okay. We're not going to hold you accountable, but if anybody wants to stay on and have questions, go ahead.
Really,
so thanks, everyone.
Nice experience this week. We've been playing around with the effort ritual, I guess you could say, of in basketball, when they take a shot, a lot of times they're pointing back at the guy that passed them. We took it from North Carolina. We've been playing with it this week at practice of when a player recognizes that he's done well or has gotten a great accomplishment during a play, pointing back to somebody else and pointing at them to give them the credit, to reflect the credit back. I got to tell you, it's awesome when you see running backs coming back pointing at their lineman, or an offensive lineman yesterday pointing at his scout team guy going, thank you, thank you. And I'll tell you what, the attitude of what that's done with the team this week has been it's been pretty mind-blowing. That's awesome. It's been nothing but fun practices with kids laughing.
Very cool.
That's really
I'd share that with the group.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's fantastic.
Good.
All right. Everybody good?
Good.
Thank you, Kelly. This is great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for playing. And I'm going to I will also email you the link. We're recording all of these, so I'm going to have the link available so you guys can watch them later. If there's anything you missed, so you don't have to take notes while it's going on, I'll send you the link to it.
Awesome.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.